Welcome back, everyone. My name is Patrick, and you're watching a very special edition of the Oilers Rundown, coming to you from, what park are we in Tyson?
I believe we drove so far through one of the Glenmore parks that we're at Weaselhead Park now, or the Weaselhead Nature Preserve.
Weaselhead Nature Preserve in Calgary here. A nice little beautiful view in the background here. Can't pick up any mountains. Maybe we'll get that later today from a different video.
But we found trees in southern Alberta, so that's pretty impressive.
That's true. Yeah, there's some trees here, and it's a beautiful view. You get Tyson from Dolly TV. You're joining me today, and we're going to talk a little Oilers here in enemy territory, so extra special. Maybe we get a Let's Go Oilers chant going in the background there.
I mean, it's also nice that we got the sunshine. I don't know, for those of you up north in Edmonton, you've been dealing with the same stuff we have been down here. You get rain every other day or every day, and you might get 20 minutes of sunlight if you're lucky. So, you know, Blue Sky City, that's what they're calling Calgary nowadays after they got rid of the Feel the Energy slogan. And as we look around today, we actually got blue sky in the background. So you can believe us, it's not raining today.
Yeah, no, we'll take it for sure. It's a beautiful day for a video. Absolutely is. So I've got a few topics I wanted to cover today.
All right.
Mr. Ryan Lotsberg over at Heavy Hockey put out a nice little article. I'll link to it in the video description below, talking about Paul Coffey and his, recent history with the Edmonton Oilers, not going back to his playing days, but as we know, he was the assistant coach running the defense for the Edmonton Oilers, and before that, pretty much Daryl Cates' right-hand man upstairs, and he returns to that position. Now, the thought is, how much influence does Paul Coffey have? Ryan noted in his article that Paul Coffey seems to come in just before changes are made. He kind of became the Oilers' skills coach, and within a few months of that, Peter Chiarelli, Todd McLellan no longer with the Edmonton Oilers. So Ryan was kind of wondering in his article, is this a harbinger of things to come? I can't see the Oilers making any immediate changes. I mean, Stan Bowman's only been here a year, and in that year, the Oilers went to the Stanley Cup Finals. So we're not seeing anything immediate there, but what kind of brought up the Paul Coffey thing was he was seemingly upset that Evander Kane was traded to the Vancouver Canucks. This was according to a report from the Two Mutts Hockey podcast. So I don't know, your thoughts on that, Tyson?
Well, anything related to Paul Coffey, I'm going to take with a little bit of a grain of salt. Because again, you're talking about whether you want to say old boys club or you want to say legacy member of the Edmonton Oilers, right? Kind of like a Craig McTavish and a Kevin Lowe. They're always going to be involved in some aspect, whether we know the full extent or not. So I think when you bring up the point about kind of looking at the point of Coffey's been around when changes happened, you have to remember both when Jay Woodcroft was fired and when Todd McLellan was fired. And you look at that and it's like, you're talking about that November window there. What were commonalities there? That would have been a slow start for the Oilers in a year where expectations were higher than, let's say, normal, right? Yeah. That's what I'd say. Now, that said, there's a reason he's around. There's a reason he continues to be around. I know Craig McTavish has kind of pulled back from a lot of major responsibilities with the organization.
Kevin Lowe as well.
Yeah, Kevin Lowe's more so,
an
I think, for the past
really.
10 years been on the charity side, actually. But you kind of look like they're always going to be there. Craig McTavish on the panel with Gene almost every night when we're at home right now. So it's kind of one of those things is, you know, every team's going to have their old players that hang around the city, hang around the team. And at least for Paul Coffey, he's got maybe a cushy position that keeps him there. Because I think the Oilers, from an aspect organizationally, understand that if the guy did that, just coming in cold on the bench for 2 years, got you to the Stanley Cup final with that defense, let's be honest, fully healthy this year, it's going to be much better shape than it was the past 2 years. But again, I think the organization recognizes there is some real ability with Paul Coffey, at least either in the hockey operations or on a coaching role. So to have him around, even if you're just kind of shuffling him around and giving him special titles, it's better you have him than somebody else.
Absolutely. Just with Jeff Jackson in his position as CEO and president, and Paul Coffey, I guess, doesn't really have, he has official position like special advisor or whatever it is, but because I don't know how hands-on he really wants to be. Because as I said, like Ryan was leaning towards it in his article, whether the Oilers were eventually going to give Paul Coffey more power, but I think they know Connor McDavid really trusts Jeff Jackson, and You could say Jeff Jackson definitely had a rocky July 1st previously when both of their big free agents were gone as of July 1st this year.
But I'd say Jeff Jackson, what I'll say about him is we found out a lot this past year that he doesn't spend a lot of time in Edmonton, really, right? There was a lot of made of he's not in town or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if there's a little bit of maybe Paul Coffey's your man on the ground, and you
Could
got
be.
Jeff Jackson
Yeah.
kind of going around dealing with things and really being the face of whatever you want to say Jeff Jackson's title is, right? I think we're also very familiar in Edmonton that just because you have a title doesn't mean you necessarily do all the things. Like I think we saw Zach Kassian take that pro scouting role or whatever and be immediately let go within a year as well. So whether that was just a favor to a former player or whatever, but I think there might be a little bit of in the Oilers organization, especially now with the people they have, right? You've got a Paul Coffey, you've got a Jeff Jackson, you've got Stan Bowman, you've got now a head coach that's been to 2 Stanley Cup finals in a row. You've got some high profile hockey people in the Oilers organization, and that's not to mention everybody else that's around, right? Like it's not like Rick Pricey isn't a big name as well. So there's a lot of big names. I wouldn't say egos. I don't think we have a lot of big problems. Like I obviously the July 1st thing was definitely Jeff Jackson. Like this is my stamp, let's go. But I think we're very well off that we've got a lot of high profile people that have a very diverse set of skills. And I don't think that means everybody has to stay in their job and that's all they do. Because I don't know, based on what we know of the Oilers organization over the past 2 years with Jeff Jackson, if that would work if other guys weren't kind of pulling some weight in the background too.
For sure. And I mean, we've heard talk with Connor McDavid extension coming up here that Connor McDavid wants to keep some pressure on Edmonton Oilers management.
Yep.
And maybe you could see Paul Coffey from that point of view where I don't know if they would have make Paul Coffey general manager, but it kind of keeps the pressure on Stan Bowman. And it's like, we've got a guy here that we feel could possibly just step into that role.
Yeah.
If you don't deliver, and like I said, I'm not sure. I'm sure that Stan Bowman isn't on the verge of getting fired. I'm not saying that. But it does kind of keep the pressure on here. And we'll get into the Connor McDavid stuff in a sec. But there's been some reports, the Mug on Instagram talking about Sebastian Cossa with the Detroit Red Wings, formerly with the Edmonton Oil Kings, as a possibility out there. Apparently Bob Stauffer mentioned it. I can't say for sure whether he did or not.
That's the tough part about the new time frame for Bob Stauffer's show is it's right around home time, and unless you got the earbuds in and you're tuned in, and especially down here in southern Alberta, unless you got some kind of app on your car, it's hard to listen to the AM. But about that, Sebastian Cossa, I don't know where you're going with that, but I want to...
Well, I bring it up because it does go along with the narrative that we've heard lately that the Edmonton Oilers are going to be targeting probably a third-string goaltender who could possibly come into a backup role here. We've heard names like Nico Dawes, Michael DiPietro with the Boston Bruins, and Sebastian Cossa does kind of fit that narrative as well. The Detroit Red Wings have John Gibson, have Cam Talbot, so Cossa is not likely to be making the Detroit Red Wings this year, so could the Edmonton Oilers swoop in there? I don't think waivers is probably going to happen just with how the Oilers finished last season. They're not going to be higher on the waiver wire claim area, but a trade for Sebastian Cossa, bringing somebody home. We know Bob Stauffer was very high on Sebastian Cossa. I was looking back at some tweets back when he was getting drafted, so... I don't know. What do you think about Sebastian Cossa possibly coming home to Edmonton?
Well, again, I'll take your question and I'll turn it into my own little thing here, I guess.
Okay.
That's what I've done on you so far. No, so Sebastian Cossa, like you said, he fits the profile of kind of exactly what the Oilers have been looking for all summer long. Obviously, Oliver Rodrigue was supposed to be that guy for the past 2 years that would kind of fill that role naturally, kind of when you were ready to move on. Now the Jack Campbell stuff, the Stuart Skinner stuff, obviously the emergence of Cal Pickard at the NHL level for the first time in a little while has really helped out again as well. So Ollie Rodrigue finds himself in a position where, as far as we know, unless he's signed something overseas that hasn't been announced, he doesn't have a contract right now. And when you look at Matt Tompkins, I'm not 100% sure on this, but what I gather is he needs waivers. So now you're talking about the Oilers in the waiver wire order. You lose a goalie on the waiver wire, you're getting the scrap goalie that nobody else wants if you end up waiver wire claiming someone else, right? So you're looking at that. Sebastian Cossa, if he's available, he solves that in-between issue where, okay, now you've got star at the AHL level, at least in terms of Oilers' depth goaltending prospect situation, where now Kosa would really solve that number 3, solve that, Bakersfield problem that I want to get to in a sec. But, Matt Tompkins, if he gets claimed on waivers, it's not a huge organizational loss either.
No.
So that's where, if Kosa doesn't end up becoming a materialized thing for the Oilers, and again, I think you have to caution when players are linked to the Oilers or mentioned to be in the Oilers sphere nowadays, it's a lot of musing. And I think Bob Stauffer and a lot of the Oilers media guys will do a good job of musing about something, just necessarily similar to what we do here on YouTube, just to introduce an idea, right?
Yeah, get people talking about it.
Yeah, it's something that, hey, you know what, this does make sense if it can happen. And that's enough for, obviously, things to get ran with here in the Oilers market nowadays. So, Kosa, while it's a great idea and it probably from a lot of angles solves a lot of our issues we're looking at, the other side to it is you're probably not making it happen. If I'm looking at it likely versus unlikely, I'm still leaning unlikely.
Yeah.
Just because, again, Sebastian Kosa, unless Detroit really feels like giving up on a guy that, again, you said Bob Stauffer was so high on, and I'm sure the Detroit Red Wings are high on as well, just from a we need value back if we let this guy go perspective. I would almost see it more likely, and I'm used myself with the contacts I have in Bakersfield sitting there. If Ollie Rodriguez stays unsigned and you've got waiver wire worries about Matt Tompkins and obviously the depth in Bakersfield, I wonder if the Oilers are just kind of looking elsewhere for now, and then we'll turn around and go back to Ollie Rodriguez sometime near training camp, sign him because we know Rodriguez needs waivers as well. And now all of a sudden you're like, well, if no one's signing him, why would you worry about waivers? Well, again, you never know injuries and stuff that'll happen over the course of training camps. So now you have 2 waiver wire eligible goaltenders that can play a starting role in Bakersfield. And whether it be Kosa or Rodriguez there at the end of the day, or Tompkins, you're just kind of looking at just safety netting your goaltending, because we know start to finish that Cal Pickard and Stu Skinner, unless Peter Aubry is something special, you know what you've got in your goaltending. So safety netting that is not necessarily a bad thing, no matter how you do it.
Yeah. No, I just bring up Kosa, like it's a bit speculation, of course, but it does fit the narrative what the Edmonton
100%.
Oilers were looking for. So thought we should mention it here. And we didn't really dig into it too much before, but a 2 months report there as well that Evander Kane may come back to the Edmonton Oilers after his year is played out here with the Vancouver Canucks. I struggle to see it. I mean, Evander Kane had his home in Edmonton, so I can see how it makes sense from that point of view. He loved playing in Edmonton. But just making the cap work, I mean, it's going to be very difficult. It would have to be a much smaller contract for Evander Kane.
Well, look at it from this perspective. On the way down here when we were driving through, not traffic, but driving through the million parking lots they've got to get where we got going here today, I asked you this, right? What do you do about Stuart Skinner's extension next year? He has a good year, right? We're talking Peter Aubry might be something special in the goaltending department for us all of a sudden. If Stuart Skinner has a good year, what's Bob Stauffer been saying? $5 million?
Yeah.
Well,
at least, yeah.
If you're bringing in Evander Kane again, whatever Evander Kane thought he could make coming back to Edmonton, immediately if Stuart Skinner makes that, you got to cut that in half, and it's already probably half of what he was making when he was here last year.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility, which is why I bring it up, but I have a hard time seeing it, and you'd think if he does have a great year with the Vancouver Canucks are going to want to bring him back. Like, he was from Vancouver. He was excited to go back there. So I think it's unlikely Evander Kane returns, but we'll, I guess, wait and see about this time. Well, a little earlier than this time next year what actually happens on that front. So we got some possible extensions coming up here. Reports that Jake Wallman's likely to do an 8-year deal before those kind of contracts expire. You definitely want to get something like that in. Possibly something short-term on Matthias Ekholm. What are your kind of thoughts there, Tyson, on the possible extensions that we have coming up here?
I think the Wallman one, you get that done as soon as possible. I know there's talk of it even happening before the McDavid extension. I know we're kind of looking at the McDavid extension will be the domino that falls everything, because it's the simplest negotiation. Here you go, sign, done. That's simple. But when it comes to Jake Wallman, again, the reason why you might get it done first is just to kind of give Connor that certainty of, hey, Here's another player, cost certainty. Here's kind of now all of a sudden the cap space picture 3 years from now is a little easier to understand because you've signed Wallman. But the thing with Wallman is he's an asset that kind of what you got in Matthias Ekholm a few years back, right? A player that's going to steady your back end for several years to come. Now, the reason I started with Wallman and kind of avoided Matthias Ekholm off the start when you were talking about just a couple of years for Ekholm is we saw that Bo Akey quote yesterday or the day before. It's kind of had a couple days headlines because we don't have much going on about Akey's desire to really go out there in camp after a couple of years where he's been set back due to some injuries and just obviously, having to take his time because the Oilers don't have a need on the right side anymore. And I think for Bo Akey, his goal and his dream is obviously to push as hard as possible to make an NHL roster this year. You said, well, it's going to take 2 injuries, and we know what happens. We were talking about it in the goaltending departments. But you look at it from Bo Akey's perspective, really Matthias Ekholm being here any longer than 1 or 2 more years kind of holds that back, especially when you look at who else is all here, right? You got Nurse, you got Bouchard, you got Wallman, Kulak. I honestly think Kulak's got a great shot at retiring an Edmonton Oiler unless he wants to go chase the bag like Corey Perry did down in LA. But I mean, there's really going to be limited spots for a guy to be a top 4 guy in Edmonton over the next little bit. So from Bo Akey's perspective, the longer Matthias Ekholm's here, the longer you're held back. Unless, of course, we're just overvaluing Bo Akey and he's just more or less a Matt Benning prototype. But
Yeah.
I'd say for sure, like for Ekholm, the shorter the better. Even if you're only doing a 1-year deal. Look, the goal is to win the Stanley Cup. We figure everything else out after that. I don't we've gone through 2 cup final years, win a cup here, and then we can worry about the details.
Yeah.
But for right now, obviously, you've also got to worry about the guys in the system. And yeah, a little bit of foresight would be nice, but all that matters is winning a cup. So I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see what happens on that extension front. Bob Stauffer was mentioning, I believe it was August 27th, 28th. I can't remember the exact date he threw out there, but we should be expecting some extensions before. And like you were mentioning, it would be great for Connor McDavid to see some of those guys
Absolutely.
in place. We know he's very close with Jake Wallman, for example. So knowing that Jake Wallman, if you get him on an 8-year extension, he's locked in for the next 9 years. Definitely more appealing to Connor McDavid. So we got Connor coming up here. Let's kind of wrap up on this one. Connor, I'm leaning more towards 8 years right now. I think I've mentioned this a few times. I've heard it from a few other people as well. The talk with Connor going shorter term was that it keeps more pressure on the Edmonton Oilers, but ultimately, if Connor decides 2 years from now things aren't going, he wants a trade, he's going to get a trade. So getting out is not a problem for Connor McDavid, so I don't see any reason why he couldn't sign an 8-year deal. 4 or 5 years seems to be the new fad with the rising salary cap, but I think 8 years for Connor McDavid. I'm going to say $17 million. What are your thoughts there, Tyson?
I think you hit it on the head there simply for one thing. Connor McDavid, for a long tenure of his contract, was the highest paid player in the NHL based on contract. Well, let me tell you about this. Wouldn't you want to do that again? And the only way to maximize those dollars for the biggest contract in the NHL is 8 years. And you're not going to be able to sign for 8 years right short coming up here. So you got to be real careful about what you're doing if you're Connor and signing a shorter term deal because, you got that flexibility and the pressure on management. But again, if you're a precedent setting player and you're the best player in the league, again, there tends to be some qualifying things about that. And an 8-year deal at max term at max dollars, usually one of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We'll see what happens here, guys. Talk should pick up here now that Leon Draisaitl's wedding is in the rearview mirror here. They're all 4 of them together celebrating a honeymoon there. So when that's all wrapped up there, I'm sure talks will pick up. But like I said, more extensions coming our way in the next couple weeks if Bob Stauffer's reports are accurate there. So any other thoughts before we wrap up here, Tyson?
I do have one. I just want to ask you basically, like looking at the NHL schedule for the Oilers, I know you and I have chatted briefly about kind of our plans for this season. And I mean briefly last night at the dinner table talking about the season opener. But I just want to ask you, basically, looking at this year's schedule and kind of the tone set for the Oilers, the narrative set for the Oilers, looking at the Eastern Conference trips being early in the year, you start with the Battle of Alberta. I think fans this year are getting a lot more, fans of the Oilers, a lot more of what you wish the schedule would be every
Yes,
single
for
year.
sure. Yeah.
Just from your perspective, how much does that benefit the Oilers? Necessarily having the fan base very happy with the schedule initially, and then as well kind of setting the tone, starting with the Battle of Alberta, getting these trips out, and then really what's been a mad dash for the Oilers the past 2 years, is it going to be so much so because of the schedule this year?
I see them having a much better start. Absolutely. I mean, we were at that season opener last year. One of the worst games I've ever. Literally in the middle of the second period, I wanted to go home.
Yeah.
It was. I don't think we even did a video that night. It was just an atrocity of a hockey game. But Battle of Alberta, that's got to get both teams going right off the bat. We got some youth coming in. Ike Howard, Matt Savoy. I think the boys are going to get off to a strong start for the first time in a few years here. It's not going to be as much of a mad dash, like you said, getting that Eastern trips out of the way in the first half of the season. I think everything points towards the Oilers having a much better season here. Maybe they even challenge for first in the Pacific, but as we've seen in past years, whether they actually get first in the Pacific doesn't really matter, but just a stronger time overall, get some more home ice advantage in there when you come playoff time. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a great opportunity for this team to get off to a much better start.
Then if that's the way you're going, I'll go with a follow-up here. If we don't have to worry about Paul Coffey due to a poor start, that's how we obviously started the video.
Yeah.
If you've been along for the whole ride instead of skipping forward, then if you don't have to worry about Paul Coffey's role because you get off to a good start,
Yes.
then you're starting with the Calgary Flames, and I'd be amiss if we're in Calgary here talking about the Oilers all day to not ask about kind of your expectations as an Oilers fan for the Calgary Flames. Bob Stauffer, I mean, if you listen to him on a regular basis, he always talks, similar to myself, about how important a good Calgary Flames team is for the Edmonton Oilers. Do you think there's a possibility the Flames are, right there where they were last year and can push for a playoff spot and maybe make our springtime and a possible 7-game series really interesting with the Oilers? Or is it more so maybe a reset year for the Flames where those growing pains actually do come in?
I lean more towards the growing pains just because the Flames, similar to the Oilers situation from a few years back, they're going to be having a brand new arena here in a couple of years. I think when they get to that point, they're going to want the team to be really competitive. So they're going to probably start moving out the guys like Rasmus Anderson, Nazem Kadri and stuff. So I don't see the Flames being as good as they were last year. They were a very hardworking team to their credit, so they stayed in the fight pretty much right till the final days of the season. So it's certainly a possibility, but I think with some of the players that they're probably going to lose throughout the year and come trade deadline, it'll be much harder for them to compete for a Stanley Cup playoff spot. But to Bob Stauffer's point, I think Oilers and Flames, both of their futures look bright, and there should be some big battles to come in the future, but maybe not so much in the current present.
All right, well, I'll let you wrap this up then. I got nothing more for you.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us here today, guys. Special guest, Tyson from Dolny TV. Thank you so much, Tyson. If this is your first visit to the channel and you like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing for all the latest Oilers content. You've been watching the Oilers Fanatic. Thanks for being a fan.
We are up on out of here.